In the year 2035, artificial intelligence, like cell phones in the past, has gradually penetrated into the life of every human being. This world had become an incredibly technological world. The convenience of life due to the use of artificial intelligence continued to grow, but the over-reliance on technology had destroyed many jobs. Almost all factories now employed machines and robots. Corporations using artificial intelligence dramatically increased productivity and lowered costs, which caused massive unemployment around the world. Eventually, this state of affairs led to the creation of a nationwide wave of resistance to artificial intelligence among humans. People demanded that the use of AI be cut down immediately and that they be given their jobs back. However, such resistance from ordinary working people could not change the course of technological progress. In the end, countless people were forced to risk their lives in games created by Mastermind for the entertainment and gambling of the upper elite. Players put their lives on the line to please those at the top of the food chain. The game was called Gold Game. The player who would go on to win in this survival game would be able to acquire untold riches, and eventually even seize control of Mastermind, rising above all social classes. Today, Chen Mo, along with the other newcomers, was also forced to participate in the Gold Game. He believed that only by winning the game could he find her. Chen Mo is a former researcher of Mastermind. One of the players was anxiously telling the other newcomers that he had heard that if a player died in the game, he would also die in reality. He was desperately trying to find out from the other players if this information was true or still false. A player with the name Wang Qiang turned to him and told him that it was all true. He even asked about the fact that the player had not seen the losers of the game being electrocuted through their helmets. Wang Qiang also pointed out that if one tried to remove the helmet, it would count as a violation of the rules. Therefore, an instantaneous electric shock would follow, so there would be no way to escape from the current situation. Wang Qiang was surprised that whether the man thought that money was so easy to get and without any risk. However, he pointed out that the man could still get out of the game. Upon hearing Wang Qiang's words, the player was incredibly frightened. He stammered and said that he was forced to play to pay off his debts. Therefore, if he quit the game, his life would end anyway, so he had no other choice. Zhao Yukai, standing beside him, gave him a bloodthirsty look, informing him that he could no longer wait for the game to start. After all, he had heard that there would be no punishment for killing in the game. He smirkingly asked the other players not to die too quickly, as he didn't want his fun to end so quickly. Chen Mo paid attention to Zhao Yukai's words, noting in his mind that this person had only come to the game to kill other players. However, he had expected something like this because such psychopaths were everywhere. Finally, the gates of the dungeon began to open. The game welcomed players to the Gold Game. The game then asked all the players to walk through the gate that opened and enter the dungeon. Chen Mo looked around, inspecting what the first level of the game looked like. It was funny to him that the first level of the game only had a huge empty hall. Right in front of the players, a girl began to materialize from the data. The girl greeted the players with a smile, informing them that she was the host of this game and her name was Xiao Tu. After that, she decided to explain the rules of the game to them. Since they were only at the beginner level, she believed that they would only have to memorize the rules she would tell them in order to pass the first level. After that, she epically closed her eyes and snapped her fingers. In the same instant, a game window materialized in front of the players, stating that the number of survivors in this round should be no more than 3, and the boss was completely invincible. Sitting on the giant game panel, she smiled, wondering if they understood such simple rules. The game window began to slowly evaporate and Xiao Tu jumped down. Stepping on the floor with both feet, she bowed slightly, letting them know that this was the end of the explanation of the rules. She then wished them a pleasant game. Her body began to dissolve as she informed them that she hoped to see any more of the surviving players. She even laughed at the end of her words. Zhao Yukai did not understand at all why these were all rules. He tried to ask the other players if any of the other players understood what the girl was even talking about. The rules were simple, so Chen Mo immediately remembered about her saying that only 3 or less people could survive. So Chen Mo realized that out of the 10 players, 7 players had to die in order for the rest to pass on. He couldn't understand how this was even possible. However, he and the other players had no time to think. as a giant snake began to materialize in front of them. The other players couldn't understand what was in front of them. The giant snake's mouth was already trying to swallow the players. Chen Mo and some players rushed to flee from the snake, while a few other players froze in place in fear. Other players advised to run and not stand still. The giant snake instantly swallowed 2 players who froze in fear. Players didn't realize how they even needed to get through this level. They didn't understand how they could dodge the level boss and how they could defeat it. Chen Mo told them all to scatter and not to stand in a general heap. He was still pondering over what this level was even about. The guy couldn't believe that 7 players had to die in order for the remaining players to pass on. At this moment, the snake had definitely targeted Chen Mo and was following him on his heels. The giant snake was practically at his feet and had already opened its mouth wide. However, at this moment, the guy abruptly bounced to the left towards the pillar next to him. The giant snake did not follow him, but swept past him. Chen Mo noticed that after the snake swallowed the 2 players, the tail of the snake became noticeably longer. In addition, the giant snake could only turn 90 degrees when moving. He finally made the assumption that this level was based on the famous Snake video game. Assuming it was a snake game, he remembered that the snake's head could only turn at right angles. So as long as he keeps in a 90-degree sector in front of the snake's head, then at a 45-degree angle, it would take the snake 2 moves to bite him. Such a maneuver would only give a slight delay from the inevitable, but it would help to last longer in this game. By this point, Zhao Yukai was hiding behind one of the pillars, but the giant snake saw him. Zhao Yukai cursed and rushed to escape from the giant snake, completely unaware of how to fight the boss of this level. He wasn't going to die so easily. After all, he had some pretty big plans for the game. The next moment, he was incredibly shocked and scared when the giant snake's mouth appeared right in front of him, and the snake tried to devour him. But at the last moment, Zhao Yukai was able to bounce aside, and the snake swept past him. Getting up from the floor, he was surprised, not realizing how the snake was able to overtake him and appear in front of him. Zhao Yukai didn't have time to think about the matter properly, as the giant snake had already appeared behind him. He rushed to run as fast as he could, realizing that the giant snake was targeting him. Running at full speed, he tried to think of something in a hurry, because if things continued like this, his death was only a matter of time. At this moment, behind one of the pillars, he saw Chen Mo standing there. He instantly decided that the guy should die instead. Zhao Yukai began to run around the column behind which Chen Mo was standing. Chen Mo, on the other hand, was thinking that Mastermind would never create a level that was impossible for a player to pass. Therefore, he felt that the key in passing the initial level lay in the second rule. In his opinion, the snake was completely invincible, but nowhere did it say that it couldn't die on its own. According to the rules of the snake game, if the head crashes into its own body, it's game over. So the guy decided that if he kept circling the snake in a 90-degree sector, then it would then take the snake at least 100 moves to reach him, which meant that in that time, the snake could crash into itself. After thinking about the current situation, Chen Mo decided that he couldn't just stand there and wait for his death, so he decided to try and carry out his plan. However, at this moment, Zhao Yukai appeared behind him and grabbed him by the shoulders. Zhao Yukai began to hold him down as the snake approached them. Zhao Yukai then pushed the guy directly into the snake's mouth, saying goodbye to the guy. Chen Mo flew straight into the mouth of the giant snake, which had already opened its mouth to swallow him. At this moment, it was as if his entire life flashed before Chen Mo's eyes. He remembered the moment when his sister offered to taste the new dish she had prepared. The guy was even surprised and slightly disappointed, as he realized that at the threshold of death, one does see something similar from their lived life. His sister assured him that she was no longer a child and that the wound on her arm was just a scratch. She noted that seeing her brother eating the food she had prepared with gusto was the best reward. The girl suddenly declared confidently that she was Jin Can and that she hadn't eaten rice for so many years for nothing. From this day forward, she wanted to feed her big brother only the best dishes. There was sadness and resentment in the guy's voice as he called his sister a cheat. After all, she had promised to cook for him every day, but she hadn't kept her promise. Besides, the meal she cooked at that moment turned out to be the last one. One accident shattered their peaceful life. Chen Mo lost his job as a researcher at Mastermind, so in an instant, everything collapsed. When he came home, he asked that his sister not to worry about him. However, his sister claimed that her brother was talking nonsense and that she would never leave him. At that moment, he thought about how his sister would blame him for the situation, but she hadn't abandoned him. Jin Kankan asked her brother not to worry, informing him that she would figure out a way for them to make money on her own. She claimed that she was no longer the little girl who'd done nothing but hide behind his back. The girl decided to think about what could be done about their situation. And in the end, Jin Kankan went to the damn game, so the guy incredibly blamed himself for everything, because his sister never came back. Even though half of his body was already in the giant snake's mouth, the guy kept fighting back, believing he had to survive and find his sister. He couldn't let himself die in this cursed place. The guy tried with vigor to get out of the giant snake's mouth. He managed to do so, but in the same instant he realized that he was missing the lower half of his body. Falling to the floor, Chen Mo despaired that he couldn't fight anymore. He was so unwilling to die in this cursed and hated game for him. The guy's eyes slowly closed as his life came to an end. Suddenly, the system's game panel appeared in front of his eyes. The system reported that researcher Chen Mo had been detected, and then his ID was listed. After that, the game reported that the administration system had been successfully activated. The guy's metadata emerged in some strange space. He didn't understand what was going to happen next, or where he was even. The system reported that it was only bound to the Chen Mo player. The system then activated administrative privileges for the Chen Mo player. He had access to Administrator Privilege Level 1, Code Edit, Free Edit Character Points, for himself only. The guy was surprised to hear about some kind of system in the game. Looking at the game window in front of him, Chen Mo thought that it was similar to the attribute panel, where one could add character points and more to the game. Now hope began to flicker in his soul that he could rectify the current situation. After thinking about his current advantages, Chen Mo decided that he should emphasize on agility to increase his speed. But just as he was about to crank agility to the maximum, he abruptly stopped. At that moment, he realized that this approach was fundamentally wrong. After all, he was just increasing his speed to keep running, and that wouldn't solve anything. So he decided that right now, what he needed most was strength. The system reported that the attribute was successfully increased. The system noticed that the player's original data was missing, so it asked him if he needed to restore the data. The system then decided to give him advice. According to the system's advice, the guy could edit and change attributes at any time. In addition, all of his attributes would increase with each level increase. With his new ability, he could maximize an individual attribute at any time, and in the future, as his level and attributes increased, the ability would become even more powerful. He now believed that he didn't care about the rules of the game, and that he would dictate his own rules in the game. The system reported that the guy's strength started to increase. Then the data recovery started, and the guy's lower body started to transform in the game again. He had just recovered and continued to examine his body, and the giant snake was already behind him. The giant snake aimed at him and opened its mouth wide to swallow him. This time, the guy didn't resist and let the giant snake swallow him. The snake was about to crawl further for its next victim, when suddenly the snake had an unpleasant sensation. The snake's mouth began to slowly open, against the snake's will. With his right hand, the guy opened the snake's mouth, and with his left hand he grabbed the snake's tongue. The guy was incredibly angry and pulled the snake's tongue and wondered if that was how the snake liked to eat. He couldn't wait to see who would eat who today. So he went ahead and bit the snake's tongue. The snake extremely disliked it, so the snake spit it out and tossed it aside. The guy easily grouped himself and landed on the floor completely unhurt. The rest of the players looked at the guy with horror and fear, completely not realizing whether the guy in front of them was human or not. Looking at the giant snake in front of him, Chen Mo thought about whether his attack on the snake had any effect. However, his past attack on the snake had proven that the snake was not invulnerable to physical attacks. While in the admin panel, he realized that with his current strength, it was unrealistic to think that he would be able to kill a level 1 boss. Even if he sacrificed everything else to maximize his strength, it would be difficult for him to deal with the snake. All he could do was only hold the boss back for a moment. So he decided to stick to his original plan and put all the characteristic points into agility. Chen Mo decided to use the rules of the snake game to make the snake's head attack the snake's body. Taking advantage of his speed, he began to deftly dodge the boss's attacks. He remembered that in the original snake game, the game ended when the snake's head touched its body. As far as he remembered, that was the only weakness of the snake in this game. While he was thinking about his plan, the snake was already back by his side and wanted to eat. However, with his current speed, he quickly dodged the snake's mouth, and then stood next to the snake's body, acting as bait. Staring intently at the snake's head, he wanted to see if the snake would bite itself. The giant snake's mouth once again tried to swallow such an annoying meal. However, at the last moment, Chen Mo jumped aside and the snake mouth tried to eat its own body instead. In the next instant, he looked up to see what had happened, and what he saw stunned him. He was amazed that the giant snake had some sort of defense mechanism, so the snake didn't devour itself, but the head just turned to the right side and the snake crawled on. The guy realized that his assumption was correct, and that he had found the snake's weakness. However, Mastermind had already eliminated the boss's weakness. So without thinking for long, the guy hid behind the pillar at high speed again so that the snake wouldn't notice him. After the boss's only weakness disappeared, everything went back to the beginning. Therefore, the guy began to guess that this kind of course of action was in accordance with the rule that the boss was invincible. Now, according to him, the players must believe in the rules, and that everything will only end when there are only 3 or less people left alive. Thus, all players are trapped. As soon as players believe in the rules of the level, they will inevitably start killing each other, falling into a hopeless situation from which there is no return. This is exactly the version of events, though the administrators of the game to see. At this point, the guy remembered that he is no longer a simple player, so if he can cope with the defense mechanism of the boss, he can succeed. However, for this plan, he needs someone who can get the boss's attention. Then he will have to use external force to make the snake's head touch the snake's body. Looking towards Zhao Yukai, the guy decided that he was the right person for this plan. Pulling the hood of his jacket over his head, the guy made a decision, noting that he now had manpower. 3 men stood near the column. One of the men noticed that the guy had disappeared from sight. Zhao Yukai told them to watch the flanks. Zhao Yukai asked them to listen to him. He said that they just needed to hide in this place because according to the rules, they could pass this level if there were only 3 people left, and there were just 3 of them. Zhao Yukai added that they didn't need to look for trouble unnecessarily. Zhao Yukai became their boss. One of the men remarked that their boss was simply brilliant. He thought about the fact that a guy with extraordinary strength has some trump cards up his sleeve, and that maybe he could kill a level boss. Zhao Yukai swept up that if the guy could really kill the level boss, he would save them the trouble and they would win without doing anything. However, at this moment, Chen Mo appeared behind their backs. He inquired how it was that they were going to win without doing anything. The men were surprised by his sudden appearance. As he approached them, he declared that they were acting as if he did not exist. Instantly, he appeared right in front of him, causing them to press their bodies closer to the pillar. Chen Mo grabbed Zhao Yukai by the throat and pinned him against the wall. He told him and the others not to move, because if his hand accidentally slipped, Zhao Yukai might drop out early. Zhao Yukai asked the guy to stay calm and discuss the situation. He admitted that what he did towards the guy was not very cool. Plus, he felt that they should work together in the current situation. However, the guy indicated that he might just kill him and team up with the other players. Gasping for air because of the lack of air due to his compressed throat, Zhao Yukai admitted that he was wrong and asked the guy for mercy. At this moment, his subordinate tried to attack Chen Mo, telling him to let his boss go. Since the man was so insistent, Chen Mo threw Zhao Yukai towards the man. Zhao Yukai was still trying to beg for mercy, and his subordinate was already out of the game. But he finally gave up and tried to insult the guy. However, Chen Mo didn't let him finish and stamped his face into the floor, stepping on his head with her foot. Chen Mo admitted that he already had a plan that if it worked, he would be able to end the giant snake. But to realize his plan, he needed a bait to distract the snake. Therefore, he pointed out that Zhao Yukai had the choice to either become the snake's bait or die right now. Since time was short, the guy told him to make a choice immediately. In an attempt to survive, Zhao Yukai pitifully shouted out that he would become the bait for the giant snake. He believed that he did not run away shamefully, but because he was wise. After all, a wise person knows when to give in. Zhao Yukai believed that he needed to pass this test first, and then he would have many more opportunities to take revenge on the guy. Chen Mo threateningly told them to run forward, noting that if he saw Zhao Yukai idling, he wouldn't mind taking his life before dealing with the level boss. Running away, Zhao Yukai asked if the guy could match the beast. His subordinate asked if they would really listen to the guy and act as bait. The man felt that this job was too dangerous, and they had already lost one of their brothers, so they couldn't risk it again. Zhao Yukai smirked, noting that he had never said anywhere that he would be doing this on his own. Approaching the other players, Zhao Yukai pointed out to them that if they didn't want to die, they should go and become the bait. They would have to attract the beast to this place for him, since he had already figured out how to deal with the monster. However, another man noted that he couldn't handle it. Another player thought that if Zhao Yukai knew how to defeat the boss, then he should go and carry out his plan himself, and that he shouldn't drag them into a dangerous venture. However, Zhao Yukai walked up to him and simply kicked him in the stomach, causing the man to fly off a great distance. In the same instant, while the man was holding his stomach in pain, a snake appeared behind him. In an instant, the snake's mouth slammed shut, and the snake swallowed the man. The remaining players from this group were incredibly frightened by the sight they saw. Zhao Yukai yelled at them, informing them that he had been too kind to them. He even pointed out that whether they wanted to believe him or not, if they didn't do as he said, their lives would be instantly cut short. The remaining 3 players hesitantly began to do as he said. He even indicated that they should run to do his bidding. Suddenly, he grabbed the blonde girl's arm. The poor girl was terrified. He told her to stay. The girl was terrified, not realizing what else he wanted from her, since she was already going to do what he had told them before. Zhao Yukai hugged her, informing her that he would give her a choice, as she could work for him from now on. He pointed out that when everyone else died, the 3 of them would pass this test. If she refused, she could join the other players on their way to the grave. The man ran away from the boss, screaming that Zhao Yukai had just sent them to their deaths. The girl also pointed out that they would only be able to survive when there were 3 or fewer players left. The girl kept running, but kept yelling that they must not let the scum succeed, and asked the man to run. At the same instant, the boss ate one player. Seeing what happened to the other players, the frightened blonde girl agreed to join Zhao Yukai. She said that as long as Zhao Yukai didn't kill her, she would do whatever he asked. His subordinate wondered if their plan would work. After all, the girl wouldn't be able to last long running away from the monster. However, Zhao Yukai felt that it would be better if she couldn't accomplish the task at hand. Since then, they would still be able to reduce the number of survivors. Looking at the blonde girl, he believed that he couldn't die here and was already anticipating his good life that he would be able to enjoy after passing the challenge. Turning his attention to the guy, he considered that he just didn't expect him to act like this, but now he would definitely kill this player. The girl fought desperately for her life, but at that moment the monster caught up with her and she was eaten. His subordinate noticed that the head of the snake was moving towards them. Zhao Yukai realized that the perfect moment had arrived. Now they needed to make it seem like they were cooperating with the guy and wait for the right opportunity. He shouted loudly to the guy that they were about to bring the boss to him. Looking at Zhao Yukai with a look full of pity, Chen Mo thought that he was a walking problem. As a result, he decided that as soon as he had the chance, he would eliminate such an unstable element before it caused another problem. The guy asked them if they had played the snake game before. He then pointed out that if the snake's head hit the snake's body, the game should end. The man was surprised if this was such an easy way out of their situation. However, Zhao Yukai informed that it was nonsense and that he had already tried it when the snake chased him. But that option was useless. He pointed out that the snake had a defense mechanism. When the snake's head approached its body, the head would suddenly dodge sharply, so the snake's body and the snake's head would never make contact. In addition, he believed that if it was that simple, the guy would have already accomplished this task by himself and defeated the boss. At this moment, Chen Mo appeared behind him and kicked him on the back, telling him to just stop talking nonsense and do as he commanded. He then abruptly walked back to his seat. Holding his back in pain, Zhao Yukai shouted that they would do what the guy asked. The girl ran as hard as she could and asked Zhao Yukai for help, and Zhao Yukai told her to go jump to the inner side, as it was the safest place there. Zhao Yukai, the man and the girl were able to bounce to the side. At this moment, the giant snake mouth targeted Chen Mo once again. A sly smile appeared on Zhao Yukai's face as he felt that there was a chance for him. He already thought that the guy would finally be finished. However, at this moment, Chen Mo focused all of his characteristics point on strength and struck the giant snake with all his might, which drastically changed its trajectory. Zhao Yukai was shocked by what the guy had done, but he was even more shocked that the giant snake's mouth was now approaching him. Would the snake eat such an insolent Zhao Yukai? Zhao Yukai was in shock, not understanding how this was even possible. While passing through Zhao Yukai, a giant snake chewed off his right arm. Zhao Yukai howled in pain after the snake chewed off his arm. Finally, the giant snake gnawed its mouth into his own body, and then the giant snake bit through its own body and passed through further. Zhao Yukai fell to the floor and screamed in pain, so a man ran up to him and asked if he was all right. Agonizing in pain, Zhao Yukai wailed for the guy not to think that this was the end. He promised to still remember this guy's act. At this moment, a system notification appeared. The system was congratulating Chen Mo for dealing damage to the boss in the Surrounded by Snakes game instance. As a result, Chen Mo had obtained the hidden achievement, Snake Hunter. In addition to this, the system reported that his level was being upgraded to level 3, and he received 6 points that could be freely distributed among attributes. Chen Mo was astonished when he realized that the game reported that the boss was only injured. He thought that the final blow should have destroyed the greedy snake. Therefore, the guy couldn't believe that the snake was only injured. Looking at the giant one, the guy refused to believe that the beast could still be alive. Just at this moment, Xiao Tu appeared in front of the surviving players and gave them a round of applause, congratulating all the surviving players for successfully completing this game dungeon. In addition, she said that all the surviving players would receive their respective experience points and cash rewards. Xiao Tu then shared that players could freely distribute 3 attribute points. In the same instant, Chen Mo's attributes increased significantly. Strength from 2 to 3, agility from 2 to 3, intelligence from 3 to 4, and stamina from 3 to 4. Xiao Tu said that the MVP player gets an extra chance to draw in the raffle. Xiao Tu noted that the scoring details will be announced at the end of the game. Players can view the details on the attributes panel, a point she didn't want to elaborate on. Zhao Yukai's attributes increased, strength from 3 to 4, agility from 2 to 3, intelligence from 1 to 2, stamina from 3 to 4. His subordinates' attributes increased, strength from 2 to 3, agility from 2 to 3, intelligence from 1 to 2, stamina from 2 to 3. At this moment, the arm on Zhao Yukai's body that was no longer there suddenly began to transform again. His subordinate was incredibly happy after paying attention to his boss's arm. The girl was glad that her level had increased. She was glad that now her wasn't completely helpless like before. A game attribute panel appeared in front of the man's eyes. He tried to study it, having realized that the attribute panel appeared at his first request. Now all he was thinking about was where he should allocate the 3 extra attribute points. Xiao Tu continued to tell them the details of the game. She said that as they leveled up, any negative status effects on their bodies would also be removed, and their bodies would be restored to their original state. Zhao Yukai continued to watch and rub his returning right hand. He was elated, noting that the heavens had not abandoned him. Walking from side to side with a smile, Xiao Tu announced that they were now implementing the majority principle. Only the players decide whether to activate the hidden quest or not. Furthermore, she pointed out that if the number of players present decreased to 3 or less, then the hidden quest would be activated forcibly. Xiao Tu then resolutely walked towards Chen Mo, coming too close to him. Xiao Tu looked at him and made a special note, noting that once the hidden quest was activated, it would be impossible to cancel it. If the hidden quest is passed, all survivors will randomly awaken 1 skill. They will also receive generous rewards, and these rewards are unique. She glared at Zhao Yukai and remarked with a smile that players should not miss such an amazing opportunity to obtain valuable rewards. She even urged the players to take advantage of this opportunity. Zhao Yukai was stunned by her recommendation. After that, she announced that the 1-minute countdown would now begin, and in that minute, they would have to decide whether or not to accept the hidden quest. After her words, the countdown immediately began. All of Zhao Yukai's thoughts were taken over by the fact that he could gain a skill for completing the hidden quest. Zhao Yukai wasn't prepared for the fact that one could directly obtain a skill. He had heard that players with and without skills were just heaven and earth, so much so that they differed so much. Chen Mo noticed that since they had 4 surviving players, the conditions for opening the hidden quest had not been met. Now he was realizing more and more that the so-called hidden quests and trap rules were practically the same thing. However, he couldn't understand why the game would resort to such tricks and create traps to lure players into a hidden quest. Looking at the smiling Xiao Tu, who was looking in his direction, Chen Mo began to understand the rules of the current game more and more. If a player dies in the game, he would also be killed in real life by the extremely strong electric current of the helmet, which means the system itself is designed to push players to their deaths. No one cares if players survive or die. Their real goal is to lure players into hidden dungeons with higher death rates, thus generating more traffic and ratings. Therefore, Chen Mo felt that the safest option for players right now was to do nothing. The top management wanted. As a result, he declared that he would not agree to hold a hidden quest. Blondie was in solidarity with him, noting that she wouldn't stay in this cursed place for a single second longer. So she was against the decision to start the hidden quest. Another player stated to the boss that now they had enough money for a while. He thought that this place was too dangerous and they should leave this place as soon as possible. Zhao Yukai, on the other hand, seemed to be clinging too tightly to such an opportunity. Xiao Tu glared at them, wondering if that was their choice. She said that she was sorry to hear such a response from the players. The girl suggested that they should think carefully. After all, the reward for passing the hidden dungeon was very generous. Not only will they have in-game experience, items, skills, all these in-game things in their hands, but even outside the game, they will get huge money and reputation. However, Chen Mo said that they had had enough of talking and pointed out that they had already refused to fulfill the hidden quest. Seeing the stubbornness with which they continued to defend their position, she reluctantly agreed. However, she continued to delay their already made decision as long as possible. Very slowly, she began to say that since 3 of the 4 surviving players refused to comply, then she would then announce that this game had come to. At this moment, Zhao Yukai looked angrily at Chen Mo. He felt that things could not end at this point. Zhao Yukai realized that if he had any skills, the guy in front of him wouldn't be able to act so arrogant. He began to think about the fact that such a thing was only possible when he had skills. This thought completely took over his entire mind. At the same instant, he abruptly jumped up to his subordinate from the back and grabbed him by the neck with a grip. The subordinate was in shock, not realizing what was even happening. Zhao Yukai then declared for Ah Qiang to leave in peace and that he would take care of his family. In the blink of an eye, he snapped the neck of his most loyal subordinate. The blonde girl was incredibly frightened from what she saw. Zhao Yukai stood directly over his subordinate's body while the subordinate disintegrated into information and died in the real world. At the same instant, the game announced that it had only found 3 surviving players, which meant that the hidden quest, Cave of 10,000 Snakes, was open. Seeing the game's message, Zhao Yukai smiled slyly and vilely. Chen Mo was disappointed by what had happened. In his thoughts, he confessed that he completely did not expect that this savage Zhao Yukai would kill his subordinate, forcibly activating the hidden quest. However, Chen Mo and the other players had no time to think, as the dungeon shook as if it was ready to collapse. Holes began to appear in the floor of the dungeon, and small snakes began to crawl out of them, one after another. The giant snake they had fought earlier had been split into pieces after being bitten by the snake. Now these parts were separate snakes, and there were already 2 giant snakes on the battlefield. Flying overhead above them with a watch, a joyful Xiao Tu announced that 3 surviving players who met the requirements to unlock the hidden quest, Cave of 10,000 Snakes, had been found. She told them to hold out for 10 minutes. Xiao Tu revealed that all players who survived after the 10-minute timer expired would receive an additional reward. She also pointed out that the 10-minute countdown had already started. The surviving players were surprised by this sudden development. An innocent smile appeared on Xiao Tu's face as she said with surprise that it appeared that not all the players were unanimous in their opinions. Still with the same smile, she noted that she had originally thought that the hidden dungeon wouldn't be open this time. After that, her perplexed tone of voice changed drastically. As the host of this show, she thought that everything that had happened today was marvelous. She noted that every time there were people who were willing to trap themselves because of their greed. In her opinion, such people constantly squeeze their living space until they completely destroy themselves. The entire dungeon shook as if an earthquake had started. Zhao Yukai continued to believe that his choice was the right one. He convinced himself that he only needed to last for 10 minutes, and after that moment, he would no longer be equal. Chen Mo began to think about the situation he was in. He noticed that the current situation around him was escalating, and if 2 huge snakes surrounded him, he wouldn't even have 100 lives to keep the snakes from tearing him apart. In the same instant, the small snakes behind began to devour the small snakes crawling in front of them. Turning around at this moment and looking at the snakes, Chen Mo was surprised, completely unaware of what was happening now. He couldn't believe that the little snakes didn't disperse to avoid colliding with each other, but started devouring those little snakes that were in their way. A suggestion popped into his mind that perhaps the defense mechanism was actually only acting on the snake itself. If 2 voracious snakes collide, then the rule of engulfment would come into effect. So he also made the assumption that the so-called hidden quests are simply an expansion of the original game. The rules should be universal: kill these 2 beasts, and you'll pass the level. Now he had a plan matured that he needed a way to get the 2 bosses to devour each other. He realized that his last chance to survive in this crazy game. So he began to crank his strength attribute up to 13 points. At this moment, Zhao Yukai grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her behind him. He increased his agility to 3. Zhao Yukai also came up with some sort of plan for himself. He only wanted to stay in the game for 10 minutes before the timer expired, believing he had to do it at all costs, and if his life was threatened, he was prepared to use the girl as cannon fodder. However, the girl didn't think so, and then she increased her strength to 3 points. The girl then pushed her shoulder straight into Zhao Yukai's back with her shoulder. She told him to get his filthy hands off her and wished him to go to hell. Flying back from the blow straight towards the snakes, Zhao Yukai was surprised at what the disgusting girl had done to him. The little snakes began to gnaw into his body. He didn't understand how she dared to betray him. The man believed that he had gone to any lengths to activate this hidden quest, and had even killed his subordinate. Therefore, he did not believe that he was destined to die in this place. The girl looked at him in disgust and wondered what he meant when he said that she had betrayed him. She admitted that she understood exactly who he really was, and that if he was able to kill even his subordinate, then what was stopping him from killing her? The poor girl was only looking for a way to survive in such a dire situation. She remembered very well how Zhao Yukai had done to the other players, and even his subordinate. However, Zhao Yukai refused to die so easily and grabbed the girl's leg with his hand. He said that he didn't want to die and asked her to save him. The man even promised that he would give her money and generally give her everything once they got out of the game if she would save him now. The girl was overwhelmed with anger and kept fighting him off with her other foot. She told him to get behind her and die herself already, finally. Zhao Yukai could not accept his defeat in any way. He had calculated all his options, but he had not expected to die because of a girl. He decided to take revenge on her, that if he couldn't survive, she couldn't survive either. While he was holding her leg, a giant snake appeared behind her and opened its mouth, about to taste a good treat. The girl continued to scream as she didn't want to die in the snake's mouth, but in a moment her screams subsided. Now only Chen Mo was left in the dungeon as he continued his attempts to survive in this horrible place. After catching sight of 2 snakes heading towards him from different directions, he decided that to survive among these snakes, he could only find one safe place. So without thinking for a second, he rushed to the snake in front of him and jumped into its mouth. Standing in its mouth, he began to push back with his legs and arms, preventing the snake's mouth from closing. He was amazed at how powerful the power of the snake bite was. If he hadn't gotten a few attribute points after leveling up, he would hardly be able to withstand the snakebite force now. The snakes were approaching each other with their mouths wide open, and the guy realized that now everything would be decided whether his plan would succeed or fail. Waiting for the right moment, he pushed off and jumped out of the snake's mouth. At that moment, it was decided whether he would survive or not. What will happen next to the guy who is going to find his sister in the game? Is his story really Spy Kids 3D Game Over? Only in this story, Chen Mo is the older brother and his sister is the younger one. After colliding, the giant snakes began to devour each other. The length of each snake continued to rapidly shrink. No sooner had Chen Mo landed on the floor than most of the snakes had already disappeared and only their heads remained. As soon as the guy landed on the floor, then the snakes finally disappeared. The system instantly made an alert that it was discovered that Chen Mo had completed the game surrounded by snakes and completed the hidden quest Cave of 10,000 Snakes, becoming the MVP of this game. The system congratulated him for completing the hidden quest, noting that his level had increased to 8. The guy now had 10 free attribute points and was also given 1 skill choice. In addition, the system reported that his administrator privileges had been improved. He now had access to a new aspect of administrator privileges, code copying. The system explained that code copying allowed him to copy the game code of any object that had died within the last 30 minutes and use it for his own purposes. However, the level of the code summoned would be the same as Chen Mo's current level. The guy was surprised that code copying was now available to him. He hadn't expected at all that his administrator privileges would improve as his level increased. Now he was wondering if the new function of his administrator privileges meant that he could copy the code of all the dead NPCs. The system suddenly reported that there was an available code to copy, Snake. The system wondered whether to copy this code. The guy was surprised that the system was asking him that, because the answer was obvious: copy the code. After copying the code, the system congratulated the guy for owning the Snake code. The Snake code was added to the system's inventory, and the system owner could summon the snake at any time. Looking at his left hand that had the snake on it, the guy was delighted and couldn't hide his smile. Squeezing his left palm, he was ecstatic. After all, with the appearance of a new skill, he would now have a serious advantage in the future. Finally, Xiao Tu showed up and slowly walked towards the guy. She congratulated him as the winner, noting that he was the only one who had passed this game. After getting closer to him, the girl also announced that she would send his information to the Supreme God to be entered into the database. In the future, he would receive an additional generous reward for any outstanding achievements. She wondered if the guy was willing to accept the reward. However, Chen Mo was extremely unhappy that his data would be included in the database. He assumed that this was a way of selecting players who could access the AI to then take control of them. If the higher authorities decided that these people were a threat, it was possible that they would be eliminated. But suddenly he remembered that he had missed a rather important detail. These system maidens are essentially the embodiment of AI in the game. Each of them possesses a fragment of AI powers. An idea popped into his head. Although the number of them was extremely small, but if he gradually collected these fragments, even just by hunting the system maidens, he would be able to seize control of the AI from within the game. Since he didn't react to her question in any way, Xiao Tu wondered with surprise if he had heard her at all or if he had already logged out. Then, without worrying about anything else, the guy told the voracious snake to eat Xiao Tu whole. At the same instant, a giant snake appeared behind his back. The girl screamed in fear, noting that the guy was cheating. But he didn't care about all her remarks. He stood there and watched as the giant snake swallowed Xiao Tu whole with its giant mouth. The system reported that the guy had gotten 0.1% access to the One God, AI. As he touched his head, he noticed that everything had happened the way he wanted it to. So he made the decision that in the future, he needed to destroy as many AI avatars as possible, but he needed to act stealthily enough that the higher-ups would not suspect anything. At this point, he decided to leave the game and began trying to remove the helmet from his head. After a moment of heavy sighing, he managed to remove the helmet from his head. After taking the helmet off and putting it aside, he tried to catch his breath, still amazed that he was still alive. Just recently, a giant snake swallowed him, but he miraculously got out. His face was covered in cold sweat, and it was hard to breathe. He wondered if all the players were experiencing something similar. A message arrived on his phone saying that player Chen Mo had completed the Surrounded by Snakes game and completed the hidden quest, Cave of 10,000 Snakes. As a reward for his suffering, he received 200,000 yuan as donations from the spectators who were watching the game. After reading the message on his phone, the guy grinned. 200,000 yuan is an amount that an average person can hardly accumulate in a few years. But in the game, as long as you are alive, you can easily make money. Therefore, he understood even more why so many people go into the game, and not all of them out of desperation, but many for the potential easy profit. Next to his bed on the nightstand was a picture of him with his sister. The brother always remembered his sister. So after leaving the game, the first thing he did was try to call her on the phone. However, all he heard on his phone was, "The person you are calling is out of the service area. Please call later." Exhaling, he lay back on the bed, realizing that his sister still wasn't answering his calls. He still couldn't understand where his sister had gone. Chen Mo was frustrated by the memory that if it wasn't for his obsession in the past, when he vehemently opposed the use of AI in such games, he wouldn't have made enemies among the upper management. But things happened the way they did. As a result of his protests, the scoundrels in the company's management framed him, and he not only lost his job, but also found himself having to pay huge fines. Such a deplorable condition forced his sister to enter the game to earn money and solve his problems. Banging his fist with his phone on the bed, the guy was enraged. Getting up from the bed, he began to complain that ever since his sister left him some money she had gone missing, and his only known clue that she was still active in the game space all this time. Chen Mo was filled with confidence, believing that wherever his sister was, he would surely find her and bring her back. He vowed that it was now his turn to protect his sister. The streets of the night city were lined with neon signs, and life in the city seemed to come alive. One of the nightclubs was watching the 264th Gold Game, Group 7, live. On the screen, the game that Chen Mo was participating in was being shown. The man with the mohawk seemed to find the guy quite interesting. He noted that the guy was able to discern the weakness of Snake's game from the beginning, which meant that the guy had prepared well before the game. The man standing next to him suddenly laughed loudly. He liked how tough and ruthless the guy looked. Therefore, he felt that if the opportunity presented itself, he should try to get the guy on their team. That person was Tian Quan. Level 25. Team Pojun. He was the captain of this team. However, the girl sitting behind him did not share his enthusiasm. She pointed out that this was just a dungeon for beginners. The girl believed that if the people in this ordeal had been able to cooperate and work together against an outside threat, perhaps no one would have died. However, to her regret, even in a beginner's dungeon with an average completion rate of 40%, almost all the players were wiped out. Based on this, she felt that the overall level of players of the current generation was too low. That girl was Fei Ying, level 23, Team Pojun. She was the vice-captain of this team. Fei Ying said that players of the level the guy was at didn't deserve to be on her team. Tian Quan was slightly surprised by her words. Then the man laughed out loud as he continued to watch the game. Turning to the girl, he noted with a smile that Fei Ying was known as a rookie nightmare for a reason, and that she was still incredibly strict. Nevertheless, the man asked her if they could lower the standards even a little. After all, if they continued like this, they wouldn't be able to find anyone to join the team at all. However, Fei Ying felt that it was better to have fewer teammates, but better in quality. Meanwhile, the morning had come. Chen Mo had already gotten out of the shower and was already wiping his head with a towel when suddenly his phone rang. He quickly answered the call, trying to find out who was calling him. The guy was incredibly shocked when he heard a familiar voice on the phone. The familiar voice informed him that there was information about who the guy was looking for. Chen Mo asked the interlocutor to repeat what he had just said. The person informed him that she had appeared on the MVP list of a game 3 days ago. However, the person thought that this information was worth 50,000 yuan. Once the guy transferred the money to him, he was to tell the guy the details. After the guy transferred 50,000 yuan to the man, he received a message on his phone. D rank, Area 39, Group 19. The guy was to participate in the Spot the Difference game and get MVP in this game. Realizing that he had no other choice, he decided that he would have to try his luck in Area 39. Although the Spot the Difference game disappears after passing, he still couldn't miss a single trace related to his sister. So without putting things off, the guy reached for his helmet. Putting the helmet on his head, the guy asked his sister to just wait for him, for he would surely find her. Moments later, the guy was back in the game, preparing to put his life on the line a second time to find his sister. As soon as he entered the game, a giant system notification immediately appeared in front of his face. The system greeted him, informing him that he had passed the initial level and was now free to choose game locations. However, according to the agreement, within 7 days, Chen Mo must start passing the next game. If Chen Mo violates this clause of the agreement, Chen Mo will be charged significant compensation, and the company reserves the right to take enforcement action. Only now Chen Mo realized what hellish conditions the players had. Either the player participates in the game and creates value, or pays a huge ransom for his release. This way the game loses nothing, and the games would always continue, as there was no chance of the players paying the compensation. However, that didn't bother him that much right now. After all, the most important thing for him right now was to find his sister and regain control of the AI. Besides, at the moment, he still had 10 unallocated attribute points. His current attributes: Strength, 14, Agility, 10, Intelligence, 8, Stamina, 8. Where will the guy decide to redirect his unallocated attribute points, and will he be able to find information about his sister in the Spot the Difference game? Looking at the attribute panel, the guy thought about what he should pump first. Judging from his previous experience, although combat ability wasn't the only criterion for passing the game, it greatly increased the probability of survival. Therefore, he thought that strength and agility were the attributes that needed to be upgraded first. In addition, intelligence, which symbolized magic power, was not of paramount importance to him. After spending attribute points on strength and agility, the guy felt an instant and significant boost. Looking forward, the guy was surprised, not realizing what was in front of him. He thought it was a skill panel. Only now did he remember that he had gotten one skill after going through the last dungeon. So he decided to get a skill now. After all, he needed to strengthen his abilities before entering the dungeon. Therefore, he told the system to start retrieving the skill. After that, a roulette literally appeared above the guy's head as if it was from a casino. Eventually, when the roulette stopped, the guy was given the primary skill option. The system congratulated him for obtaining the Invisible Wing skill. After using the Invisible Wing skill, the player is able to briefly hover in the air. The duration of hovering in the air was 1 minute. Cooldown the skill was 10 minutes. The guy was surprised that he got the effect of short-term floating in the air. Nevertheless, even though it was not an advanced skill, but he thought that if he applied the Invisible Wing skill properly, he would be able to create a miracle at the crucial moment. After obtaining the new skill, the guy decided that it was time to go to the D-rank hall and look around. At that moment, a man approached him. He inquired if the guy had just upgraded his rank and if he was a beginner. Chen Mo tried to find out what the man wanted from him. The man confessed that he didn't want the guy to misunderstand him. After all, the man is actually a beginner too. He had only managed to get through 2 games. That's why the man approached him, as he wanted to see if the guy would be willing to team up with him. The man said with a smile that the guy could not worry since his goal was the E-rank dungeons, so there would be no serious danger. However, Chen Mo apologized to the man, admitting that he was planning to go to the D-rank dungeons, and that he would therefore not be able to team up with the man. After the guy headed towards the D-rank hall, the man tried to make attempts to stop him. He believed that rookie players shouldn't go straight to the D-rank dungeon. The man thought the act was incredibly insane, noting that the guy would definitely die that way. But rather quickly, the man's shouting stopped as the door closed behind the guy. As soon as he stepped into the elevator, a system notification popped up. The system asked that the guy confirm his entrance to the D-rank lobby, noting that once the guy chose, there was no way to cancel. The guy confirmed his entry into the D-rank's lobby. He even clarified that his target was Area D39. Watching the guy take the elevator up to D-rank, the man thought that the guy was definitely crazy. Soon the system reported that the group selection was complete and teleported all the participants of the upcoming game to the arena. A girl with a mask on her face and purple hair, Xia Shiyu, level 13, 3 dungeon walkthroughs. A man in a suit and white shirt, Zhang Tianba, level 16 dungeon walkthroughs, 5. Guy in a blue jacket, Gu Qiang, level 11, dungeon walkthroughs, 4. The guy in the cap and yellow t-shirt, Shu Tian, level 14, dungeon walkthrough, 5. And Chen Mo, Level 8, Dungeon Progression 1. The players weren't left alone for long, as a girl immediately appeared and greeted all the players. The girl was happy to welcome them to the game Heavenly Thunder and Hellfire. She was a system guide in this game. Her name was Xiao Yi, or Little Ant. After that, Little Ant started explaining the rules of the game to them, so she asked that the players listen to her carefully. Little Ant then explained that in brief, the whole area was a minefield. There were 30 anti-personnel mines hidden in the area. The players' task: either find and disarm all the mines or activate all the mines. Once players were able to accomplish either of these conditions, the dungeon would be considered complete. One of the players noted that the game is essentially similar to Minesweeper. Once they find all the mines, the game is over. Another player noted with regret that it clearly wouldn't be that easy. Little Ant confirmed his fears, noting that of course it won't be that easy. She pointed out that every 5 minutes while the countdown is going on, at least one player is required to reconnoiter. If one person breaks the rule, the whole team will be punished. The girl explained with a smile what would happen if none of the players still came out to explore the map when the time expired. She then enthusiastically showed them that there would be an explosion. If none of the players came out to explore the map, a random mine would explode, and this would continue until all the mines had exploded. Nevertheless, she said with a smile that in order to help the players through the dungeon at least a little bit, they still left them a chance to survive. Every time they went out to explore, there was a chance that one of the auxiliary items would fall out from under the player's chosen field cell. So she advised that players should use the items wisely. Pushing herself off the floor and jumping high up, Little Ant wished all players a safe passage through this game. Once in one part of the area, she attempted to jump right inside the hole, stating that she hoped that when she returned next time, all players would be alive. Her words are pretty funny considering what kind of game they're playing and how the spectators on the contrary are eager for the players to lose. She then closed the hatch behind her, leaving the players standing on the platform looking down at the minefield. The guy with the glasses thought that from the description, the dungeon didn't seem particularly difficult. He realized that this was a Minesweeper game, and if the players followed the right logic, it would only be a matter of time before they passed this game. The girl agreed with him, but pointed out that they would only be able to rely on logic in the later stages of the game. In the early stages, when players are still getting used to the map, everything in this game will be like Russian roulette, where no one knows when they will step on a mine. Chen Mo realized that everything the other players said sounded logical, but he had a sense of danger that the D-rank dungeon was unlikely to be that simple. Before they could properly reflect on the game, one of the players noted that before discussing the dungeon, the player wondered how it was that a newcomer who had just passed only the starting dungeon was in the same dungeon with them. Another player agreed with him, noting that the other players here had gone through at least 2 dungeons. One of the players thought that the guy would pull the whole group back. Another player agreed with him, noting that the newcomer was a time bomb and that he was clearly no less dangerous than the mines themselves. Zhang Tianba then stepped forward, telling everyone to stop arguing. He said that he had a suggestion for the other players, so he asked them to listen to him. Zhang Tianba reminded the other players that they had all heard that no one would be able to get out of this dungeon by themselves. Therefore, he proposed to determine the order of how the players would go by drawing lots. Whoever the number fell on would be obligated to go to the minefield. Zhang Tianba explained that any player who dared to break the rules was a danger to everyone. Therefore, he asked that the other players should not blame him if he decided to get rid of the parasite. Walking up to Chen Mo and placing a hand on his shoulder, Zhang Tianba tried to convince the other players that with this kind of situation, even a rookie wouldn't drag the team down. Regarding the future of the game, he believed that everything would already depend on the players' own abilities. After that, he finally finished his long speech by asking who was in favor of his plan and who was against his plan. To be sure, Xu Tian asked the other players if they had heard of the tyrant of Z City, and if they had, then Zhang Tianba was that tyrant. Gu Qiang also joined their conversation, noting that if the other players didn't like something, they could approach him and talk to him one-on-one. Therefore, he told the players, if there were no other opinions, to raise their hands to vote in favor of the plan that Zhang Tianba had proposed. Looking at the smug Zhang Tianba, Chen Mo raised his hand like the others. He realized that even though Zhang Tianba was acting tyrannical and authoritarian, it was still the most acceptable option at the moment. Otherwise, everything would turn into unorganized chaos, which would only make things more complicated. This honest and holy man even stated that in order for them not to doubt him, he would use the draw function built into the system. This way, everyone would rely on their own fate, and no one would act insidiously. In reality, Zhang Tianba considered the other players to be nothing more than a herd of simpletons. He had the lucky hand skill in his arsenal, so in games of luck, he was like a fish out of water. He had to spend a lot of money on the black market to get insider information. Otherwise, it would have been a pity for him to use such a valuable skill that could only be used 3 times. In the end, number 1 fell to him. He stated that luck was on his side today, and since he got number 1, he would go first and clear the way for the others. The blonde man stated that he didn't really believe in such coincidences. Zhang Tianba had pulled the lot and was immediately given the number 1. Therefore, the guy assumed that the first move was probably completely safe. The girl in the red t-shirt next to him asked him not to say such a thing, because it might get him into trouble, but he couldn't handle those players. She also noted that this is a random draw system and that players will not be able to cheat the system. Eventually, Zhang Tianba chose the square he would start playing from almost at the very top left corner of the chessboard. As soon as Zhang Tianba chose a square on the board, the system immediately teleported him there. The number 1 was displayed beneath his feet. Turning to the others, he noted that luck wasn't exactly favoring him today. He then announced that it was time to choose the next player. The girl in the red t-shirt was worried, noting that there were still so many safe zones that hadn't been opened yet, and going at random was too much of a risk. A girl asked if anyone wanted to switch places in line with her. Another girl pointed out, in her case, it's a pure game with fate, and if a little bad luck comes her way, she'll definitely be finished. Therefore, the girl felt that no one would swap queue places with her. She asked that the girl in the red t-shirt realize her situation and not waste their time. Realizing that there was no one to wait for help, the girl asked that they not rush her. At this point, thanks to his 0.1% system rights, the guy received a system notification that now the cells, 2.2 and 1.1, had swapped places. The guy was surprised by the information. Did he really get hidden information on this dungeon? Even a 0.1% mastermind could be useful. He tried to get more data so that the complexity and risks of this dungeon would become easier for him. But the system informed him that he couldn't see more information because he didn't have enough permissions to do so. Seeing the inscription, the guy admitted that he was expecting something like this. So he realized that now he would have to figure out this game based on this information alone. He wondered why the cells had suddenly switched places. Even more surprising to him, as it was to all of us, was the Windows XP watermark on the notice. Eventually, to the surprise of the girl in the red t-shirt and the rest of the players, the guy said he was willing to trade places with her. From surprise, the girl even questioned if he was serious, because there would be no turning back. Chen Mo then confirmed his seriousness by saying that he would take the second step. The red-shirted girl was relieved and stepped away from the board, telling the guy to try harder and not to delay his choice. Gu Qiang thought that the guy was definitely a beginner since he was risking his life just to flirt with a beautiful girl. The blonde guy decided to stay as far away from the rookie as possible so as not to get killed along with the rookie. Zhang Tianba found the guy interesting. He had only decided to go first because he had bought insider information about the game for a lot of money. And the guy in front of him so confidently switched places with the girl. A suspicion crept into Zhang Tianba's mind that it looked like the newcomer might also have some insider information. He remembered that a Windows XP watermark flashed on the system tray, which meant that this dungeon was modeled after the Minesweeper game from the Windows XP version. However, it just so happened that Chen Mo was just incredibly lucky, because this was the version of the game he was very familiar with. He used to play this one with his sister. On one such day, he announced to his sister that they take turns. If the sister won, she could order food from delivery. If she lost, she would cook at home and not cheat. The girl felt that her older brother was being unfair to her and hurting her. She remembered that she had only won Minesweeper from him a couple times. After listening to her, Chen Mo still decided to make concessions, informing her that he would let his sister make the first move. He pointed out that this computer was running Windows XP, so the first step in playing Minesweeper was perfectly safe. He then asked if he had taken enough care of her. The overjoyed sister embraced her brother, informing him that he was the best. Then he said that they had agreed that none of them could dispute the results of the game, and the loser had to fulfill the terms of the deal. Even at such a moment, Chen Mo was still thinking about his sister. He once again vowed that he would definitely find his sister, no matter what price he had to pay for it. Do you also often play Minesweeper with your sister or friends on Windows XP, making bets or making specific wishes? In the end, the guy concluded that since the current dungeon was based on the Windows XP version of Minesweeper, when Zhang Tianba stepped on his square, he must have stepped on a mine. However, the Minesweeper game in the Windows XP version had a first-turn defense, so the mine did not explode, but moved to the upper right corner. So the system told him that the squares had switched places. Therefore, the upper left square should contain the mine. And since the number that appeared under Zhang Tianba was 1, then all the other squares around Zhang Tianba were safe except for the top left corner. Looking at Zhang Tianba, Chen Mo began to realize that Zhang Tianba had chosen to make the first move for a reason. After all, then it turns out Zhang Tianba had gotten information from other sources. He was extremely curious as to how Zhang Tianba had gotten the information about the dungeon. It was getting close to the end of the turn, so the other players started to hurry him up. The blonde man tried to remind the guy that he only had 10 seconds left. He reminded the guy that the guy had been so brave not so long ago. The blonde man wondered if the guy was still pretending to be a hero and saving a beautiful girl. After all, in his opinion, the guy has already made a decision, and therefore should not now be a coward. The girl in the red t-shirt tried to absolve herself of responsibility for the guy's act. She stated that she did not know the fool. The girl pointed out that the guy had voluntarily switched places with her, so his choice had nothing to do with her. When the timer reached 1, the guy finally chose square on the board next to Zhang Tianba. In the same instant, he was teleported to the square chosen on the board, which surprised Zhang Tianba. Instantly, a large number of squares on the playing field opened up, which further surprised Zhang Tianba. The system congratulated Chen Mo. Since he had opened a lot of cells on the game board, he also received a lot of useful items. He received 3 low health potions, 2 low speed potions, and also a strange capsule. The other players were very surprised that the guy was so incredibly lucky. They couldn't believe that he was able to guess the right square on the board by pure chance. The girl in the red t-shirt was upset because she felt that she shouldn't have switched places with the guy, because then everything the guy got would have belonged to her. Zhang Tianba looked at the guy and said that the guy was pretty good. Now Chen Mo had time to think about the current dungeon. He thought about the fact that if they just followed the classic rules of the Minesweeper game, they would be able to pass the dungeon without any problems. However, he still remembered that this was a D-rank dungeon, so there could be hidden rules like in his previous Snake game. Therefore, the guy once again convinced himself that he shouldn't relax and couldn't be careless. In addition, after looking at Zhang Tianba, the guy came to the conclusion that Zhang Tianba had made a great effort to make the first move himself. As a result, Chen Mo realized more and more that Zhang Tianba had gotten first-hand information about this dungeon through other channels. Chen Mo remembered how ridiculous Zhang Tianba's acting had been from the beginning, and that his hypocrisy was incredibly obvious. Zhang Tianba, with a smile, once again praised the guy that even though he was a beginner, he had a sharp mind and a promising future. Zhang Tianba realized more and more that the guy definitely had insider information. He was also upset that he didn't know this information, because then he would have made a second move. All of the items that fell out to the guy were quite valuable. The items could even be used to save lives in critical moments. He considered the guy incredibly lucky to have gotten such trophies. Finally coming out of his stupor, he turned to the other players, telling them to hurry up and make their choices. Zhang Tianba reminded the other players that those of them who dared to frame everyone else, then they should remember that Zhang Tianba would act on behalf of the heavens and would settle the matter with the traitor quickly. Zhang Tianba decided that let the guy enjoy his good fortune for a little longer. Later on, with a chance, he was going to finish the guy off, and all of the guy's items would belong to him. Zhu Tian asked the boss not to worry, and that he and Gu Qiang would make sure that there was no delay among the players. Zhang Tianba was already tired of waiting, so he told the next player to hurry up. Next in line was a girl in a dress. She asked the other players not to rush her and said she would make her own choice. Looking at the board in front of her, she marked one of the squares with a red flag, saying that there was definitely a mine there. So she chose the next square on the board. At the same moment, she moved to the indicated square on the board. The number 1 appeared under her feet, so she was saved. The blonde man was next. He picked the square on the board without a moment's hesitation. When he moved to the specified point, the many squares on the board around him also became open, just like Chen Mo, and he received several items. The blonde man declared that luck favored him today. Xia Shiyu was next, followed by the man with glasses and Shu Tian. All the players managed to land safely on their chosen squares on the board. They managed to mark the location of the 7 mines with red flags. The girl in the dress couldn't understand why everything was going so easily. She thought that this level was going to be very difficult. The girl happily and surprisingly stated that it was a regular Minesweeper game. And a normal Minesweeper game can be completed by any player with his eyes closed. However, the man in glasses and a hat corrected her, noting that she shouldn't say that because it should not be forgotten that the game is quite old. So if a player is not familiar with the rules of the game, he can mess things up quite easily. The girl in the dress agreed with his opinion. At this moment, Xia Shiyu turned to the guy, calling him handsome. She inquired if he had also noticed that Zhang Tianba had cheated during the draw. Looking at her, Chen Mo pointed out that it didn't matter whether he knew that there was cheating on Zhang Tianba's part or not. After all, at best, it could be seen as exploiting a loophole in the rules. After that, she removed the mask from her face, showing him her face. Upon hearing what he said, she agreed with him. However, she noted that Zhang Tianba's contrived importance pissed her off. After extending her hand in his direction, she decided to get to know him. The girl confessed that her name was Xia Shiyu and that she was a game streamer. Xia Shiyu noticed that the guy understood something about the game in question, so she offered him some form of partnership so that they could help each other. The guy was surprised by the girl's words about mutually beneficial cooperation. He reminded her that they were in a deadly survival game, not a cozy virtual dungeon. Xia Shiyu asked him not to explain for her the situation they were in. She thought it would just be more comfortable to stick to each other in this game. Xia Shiyu noted with pity that only one of the past games had found a girl who agreed to team up with her. She even stated that she wasn't bragging to him, but although they were both girls, that girl was unrealistically strong. This was the first time Xia Shiyu had seen such a powerful player. Her face even turned red when she remembered that girl. She felt sorry that she never learned the girl's name, and only remembered that the girl had golden hair. Since then, Xia Shiyu had never met anyone else as reliable as that girl. Chen Mo immediately thought of the fact that it was probably his sister. He completely lost control of himself and grabbed Xia Shiyu by the shoulders, trying to ask her about the girl with golden hair. He literally gave Xia Shiyu all the characteristics of his sister. The long hair, the double eyelid, the mole at the corner of her eye. Xia Shiyu began to complain that he was hurting her. She said that she hadn't looked at the girl so closely and that the girl fit the guy's description very well. Chen Mo wanted to ask her something else, but at that moment, Zhang Tianba yelled at the player whose turn it was to make a move. That player was once again the girl in the red t-shirt, and Zhang Tianba was hurrying her up. He told her to immediately choose a square on the game board. She was once again in a dire situation and asked for help from the other players. She was in a panic as she considered all the available options. So now she was completely unsure of what move she should have made on the game board. However, others noted there is no 100% safe option here at all, as each square on the game board is more dangerous than the previous one. So if the girl in the red t-shirt makes a mistake, they will all pay for it. Some of the players thought that if she wants to blame someone, she should blame her bad luck, as luck is also a part of skill in Minesweeper game. Finally, a 30-second timer appeared in front of the girl. The system told the next player to make his move. If the player didn't make his move, then after 30 seconds of countdown, one of the mines on the field would be triggered randomly. Once the system said this, the girl already had 28 seconds left to make her move. Zhang Tianba was incredibly angry that his veins even swelled up all over his face. He shouted at the girl, reminding her that he had originally said when they were drawing lots that if a player broke the rules, it meant going against everyone. Angry, he headed towards the girl, noting that if she was afraid to make a choice, then he would make the choice for her. The girl in the red t-shirt crouched fearfully in a protective pose, asking him not to kill her as she didn't want to die. She asked the other players for help. However, Zhang Tianba was only annoyed by this. He pulled his hand towards her while stating that if she was so afraid of dying, he would help her. But at this moment, Xia Xiu intervened, asking him to stop. She asked him not to worry, stating that she would help the girl in the red t-shirt make a choice. The girl even asked how Zhang Tianba looked at such an option. After all, such an option did not violate the commonly accepted rules. She then turned to the girl in the red t-shirt, wondering if she would listen to her. Xia Xiu pointed out that below her was now the number 3 on the floor, and she had already marked 3 mines around her. So pointing to the square next to herself on the game board, Xia Xiu stated that there was definitely no landmine there. Therefore, if the girl trusts her, she should step exactly on the indicated square. The girl in the red t-shirt happily thanked Xia Xiu, saying that she would never forget her kindness. The other players were surprised that such a simple option still required hints. Some of the players left that loophole for themselves. Xia Xiu asked Zhang Tianba to take it easy and pointed out that the girl was just nervous, so she was confused. Finally, the red t-shirt girl took an uncertain step forward, and the number 2 appeared under her feet. The girl in the red t-shirt thanked her, noting that the girl's plan had worked and her life had been saved. Xia Xiu smiled, explaining that it was wonderful. However, the next second, the girl was no longer so happy, because instead of the number 2, a mine appeared under her feet. The girl in the red t-shirt couldn't understand what was even happening because Xia Xiu claimed that there was no mine on that square. The players were shocked by such a sudden change of squares under the girl. But at that moment, Chen Mo shouted to the rest of the players to get down. As soon as he said that, the mine exploded, instantly destroying the girl in the red t-shirt. What will Chen Mo do next, and is Xia Xiu to blame for the death of the girl in the red t-shirt? The explosion of the mine was quite powerful, and all the players were within range. Xia Xiu immediately used control gravity, and Chen Mo used invisible wings. Zhang Tianba told Xu Tian to use his skill. Xu Tian immediately used shield, covering himself, Zhang Tianba and Gu Qiang with the shield. The blonde man had time to use a treatment on himself, so although he was thrown back by the blast wave and hurt, he recovered quickly. The man with glasses and a hat and the guy with glasses were unable to defend themselves from the mine blast. In place of the still recent square on the board was now a giant hole from the mine explosion. Looking at the hole, the guy tried to figure out what was even going on. He even thought that it might have something to do with the girl who had just been here. But pretty quickly he dismissed his assumption. He thought that there shouldn't be any mines on this square, which meant that something completely unexpected had happened. The still wounded blonde man was in a rage. He pointed at Xia Xiu, saying that she had told the girl in which direction to make her move. The blonde man confessed that he had not expected her to be so beautiful and yet so ruthless. At that moment, a disgruntled girl in a dress approached her. She agreed with the blonde man that the girl was ruthless. She wondered if Xia Xiu realized that 3 players died at once because of her. She called Xia Xiu a murderer. The girl in the dress reminded the others that because there were fewer players, it would soon be her turn to make her move. She didn't want to die, so she said that since the players died because of Xia Xiu should take responsibility. Xia Xiu began to put on her headphones, noting that the place had gotten kind of noisy. She asked the other players what they were doing when the girl in the red t-shirt was begging for help. Now they had suddenly decided to get angry. Xia Xiu reminded the other players that when the decisions were made, they were also in agreement with them. But now she somehow had to be responsible for the deaths of the other players. Xia Xiu felt that they just wanted to frame her to save their own skin. Looking at the mine hole once again, Chen Mo was convinced that Xia Xiu's calculations were correct. Therefore, he assumed that the problem most likely lies where no one could see anything. Based on the logic of his reasoning, he concluded that all the information was hidden under the minefield. The mine exploded, but there shouldn't have been a mine on that square. He even wondered if he had missed some important information behind all this speculation. Glancing at the minefield again, he was surprised to see that the numbers on it had changed. Meanwhile, the other players had surrounded Xia Xiu. Zhang Tianba could not believe that the assassin had chosen to behave so arrogantly. In his opinion, she was acting so defiant, as if she thought they wouldn't deal with her. Gu Qiang told the others to grab their weapons. The blonde man supported their initiative as he felt that instead of waiting for her to turn around and stab them in the back, it was better to deal with her right now. Xia Xiu stood up in a defensive stance, telling them to try and attack her. However, she immediately stated that they could try to attack her if they weren't afraid of death. She explained that her specialty is manipulating gravity. Therefore, she would gladly give everyone the opportunity to experience a free fall in a minefield. Even Zhang Tianba, Gu Qiang, and Xu Tian were no longer so bold after her words. But at this moment, Chen Mo appeared behind the girl and surprised her very much. Xia Xiu turned around and angrily asked if he was planning to fight her too. But the guy only looked at her tiredly. Chen Mo then asked the other players to listen to him. He pointed to a mine, reporting that the minefield seemed to have a special type of mine that could move. The mines could move freely all over the game board and explode at any time. The girl in the dress was surprised by his stories about the moving mines. She thought that the guy was talking some nonsense. Gu Qiang also thought the guy's assumptions were absurd, because if something like that existed, then the dungeon could hardly be called Minesweeper. However, Zhang Tianba was not so stupid and thought about the guy's assumption. Determined to prove his assumptions to them, Chen Mo pointed to a row of numbers on the minefield, saying that there should be the numbers 3 to 332, but now there were the numbers 2333. In addition, he pointed out that the marker had disappeared, which means that the mine has moved one square to the right, so the girl in the red t-shirt got right on the square with the mine and was completely defenseless. After listening to the guy, Gu Qiang became more and more inclined to believe that the guy was telling the truth. The girl in the dress confirmed that when the girl in the red t-shirt stepped on the square in the minefield, nothing happened to her. Looking at Xia Xiu coldly, Chen Mo explained that she had encouraged the girl in the red t-shirt to step onto this particular square in the minefield because she had noticed beforehand that there was something wrong with this square. So Xia Xiu decided to find a victim to test her hunch. He wondered if it was worth it for him to continue talking. The newly confident Xia Xiu was confused, not understanding how the guy knew all this. She was curious about the guy's purpose, as well as why he helped her when she was in a difficult situation. However, the guy corrected her words, noting that she had misunderstood him and he wasn't helping her at all. After all, he couldn't let her die right now, as he needed her strength to get to the truth. From his words, Xia Xiu only laughed as if regaining the initiative. It amused her that the guy had somehow decided that she was going to help him. She was amused that she had to help him just because he said a few words in her defense. Xia Xiu admitted that she had absolutely not expected the rookie to be so confident. She even reminded him that she didn't ask him to help. Besides, she believed that the other players wouldn't be able to do anything against her. Then the guy was already staring menacingly at her, and behind his back, it was as if the giant snake boss from his first dungeon had appeared. The guy's patience broke when he stated that he was too letting her save her face. He pointed out that he was just putting her on notice, not discussing what he would do with her. The still recently arrogant Xia Xiu was startled as there was a powerful pressure coming from the guy. She couldn't understand if the guy was really just a level 8 rookie. The girl even started to think that maybe the guy was a hidden level player or a player who had logged in from someone else's account. In the end, she felt that there was nothing wrong with cooperating with him. Plus, she remembered his earlier reaction to her words, so she realized that the guy needed some information from her, and that was why he wouldn't attack her now. So she said with a smile that the handsome man didn't need to stir things up like that. She recognized that he had helped her and that she didn't want to be indebted to him. However, she admitted that her Heaven's Eye skill could only be used 3 times per game. For this game, she had already used her skill once. Zhang Tianba interrupted them, informing them that with so many numbers, it was unlikely that anyone would be able to memorize everything so accurately. Xu Tian also felt that the guy might be mistaken. However, Chen Mo explained that he was a programmer and that he was therefore very attentive to numbers, so he couldn't have made a mistake in his calculations. Furthermore, he stated that it was pointless to make baseless accusations. However, Zhang Tianba walked over to him and put his hand on his shoulder. He stated that the guy's logic was actually interesting, but right now they needed to move on with the game as they didn't have time to verify any concoctions. Gu Qiang was in agreement with him, believing that the guy should not come up with additional problems. After understanding their hints, Chen Mo tiredly exhaled. He then asked them to listen to him again. Chen Mo pointed his finger at the minefield, saying that it was not difficult to check whether the mines were moving or not. Pointing to the square in front of them, he noted that they could all see that this square was safe. Chen Mo said that he was not going to hide anything from them and that he actually had a detection skill. His skill allowed him to see hidden mines around, but the skill could be used a limited number of times. Therefore, according to his observations, there was indeed a landmine right next to the said square. Chen Mo announced that the way to test his hunch was very simple. All he had to do was to step on the specified square. Saying this, Chen Mo slowly headed towards the indicated square on the minefield. His actions scared the other players incredibly. Xiaoxiu wondered if the handsome man would actually dare to take such a step. Chen Mo was no longer listening to her and was only thinking about the past triggering of the mine. Last time, it took about half a second from triggering to detonation, which meant that he should have at most 0.2 seconds to escape, because otherwise he would be hit by the blast wave. So he decided to concentrate all available attribute points into agility. This way, he was already at the level of a player of about level 20. In addition, he decided to add low health potion and low speed potion so that he would be more likely to escape the blast. The rest of the players started backing away, deciding that the guy had just lost his mind, and if he wanted to die, the main thing for them to do was not to get hit by the explosion. Zhang Tianba also told his subordinates to move away, as they might not be able to react in time if they were too close to the guy. After that, he resolutely walked towards the chosen square in the minefield and stepped on it. At the same moment, a mine appeared on the square he had chosen. A moment later, there was a deafening explosion, echoing and blasting throughout the dungeon. The blonde man and the girl in the dress had no defense and lay on the floor. Zhang Tianba, Gu Qiang, and Xu Tian took cover under the hastily placed shield, although Xu Tian complained that his skill wasn't ready yet. Xia Xiu was astonished. Did the guy who appeared strong to her actually die so easily? However, in the next moment, looking at the explosion, she was simply amazed. Right in front of the blast wave, Chen Mo was running. And then ahead of the blast wave, he jumped as far away as possible from where the mine exploded. Xia Xiu was amazed at how fast the guy was. After all, she was well aware that even with the use of potions and such, Chen Mo couldn't move that fast. So now she believed even more in her theory that Chen Mo was hiding his true level, and that he was at least level 20. Chen Mo managed to survive this time, but this act was extremely dangerous. He had too few health points left. The guy now clearly realized that he wouldn't be able to do the same thing a second time, as he wouldn't be able to survive it. Just in case, he decided to use low health potion to heal himself for now. After his action, the other players finally realized that he was telling them the truth. The frightened blonde man now realized that there were moving mines underneath them. The girl in the dress clutched her head in horror. Her dress by this point had already been burned to a crisp by the fact 2 mine explosions. She hysterically noted that they would all die, and that the knowledge shared by the guy would not help them, as they could not see anything underground and did not know the trajectory of the mines. At this point, a giant mine sent by the system appeared in front of the players. The system announced that the players were asked to do the following exploration within a 30-second countdown. If the waiting time was exceeded, the mine would be detonated randomly. Therefore, the system advised them to be careful. The blonde man and the girl in the dress were completely demoralized. Their only thought was that everything was gone and they were finished, and winning in this dungeon was simply unrealistic. So they would all die here. Looking at the giant hole created by the mine, the guy wondered about the nature of mines. He realized that there must be a pattern to these mines' movement, otherwise the level of difficulty would be too high, which seemed illogical to him. Chen Mo realized that although figuring out the pattern of the mines was important, understanding why the mines moved was even more urgent. Just at that moment, he noticed one important detail. What was it that Chen Mo had noticed, and what was his solution to this dungeon? The guy is still no closer to finding his sister, and he has only an imaginary hope of finding his sister, who for some reason chose the option of hiding from his brother. And the most logical of options is that Master Mind is somehow controlling his sister and helping her. When will Balm find his lost Rachel, and will he succeed in climbing to the top of the tower? And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.